Captain Arya Collins stood at the helm of the U.S.S. Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the view ahead. The sleek, powerful warship hummed softly beneath her, its advanced systems operating flawlessly. The crew, a mix of seasoned veterans and eager young officers, worked in unison to monitor the ship's systems and sensors. This was humanity's first foray into deep space, and everything had gone smoothly so far. Earth had sent the Vanguard to make peaceful contact with alien civilizations, hoping to establish diplomatic relations with the various species scattered across the stars. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, eager to learn, explore, and coexist. Until now, the missions had been free of major incidents. That peaceful exploration, however, was shattered in an instant. The ship's sensors suddenly blared an alarm. A massive object appeared on the radar much larger than anything they had ever encountered before. It was the size of a small moon, drifting silently through the void. It was the Tyraxian Leviathan, a ship of monstrous proportions, its hull as dark as the void itself, a ship of legend whispered about in distant corners of the galaxy. The Tyraxians were known for their might and ruthless efficiency. Some said their dreadnoughts had never met a force strong enough to challenge them. Now, one of these titanic warships had appeared on humanity's doorstep. Captain Collins felt her stomach tighten. This was no ordinary encounter. "Captain, we're receiving a signal," the communications officer reported. "It's strange. It's not in any known language." "Try to translate," Captain Collins ordered, her voice steady but tense. The officer nodded, fingers flying over the console. But before any attempt at communication could be made, the Tyraxian Dreadnought fired. A pulse of green energy shot out from its massive guns, cutting through the vacuum of space like a blazing comet. The Vanguard shook violently as the weapon collided with their shields, sending shockwaves through the entire ship. "Shields holding, Captain," the tactical officer shouted, though his voice was strained. "But we're being pushed back. The energy from that shot, it's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Captain Collins' mind raced. She had heard of the Tyraxians' brutal reputation, but she never imagined it would be like this. The Vanguard was a ship built for speed and precision, its defenses among the best humanity could craft, but it was no match for a dreadnought of this size. She quickly issued orders for evasive maneuvers, but it was clear the Tyraxians weren't interested in negotiation. Another pulse of energy slammed into the Vanguard's shields, weakening them. The ship shuddered again, the crew bracing for another impact. "Captain!" the helm officer yelled. "We can't outrun them. Their weapons are too powerful. We're not going to make it if we try to flee." Captain Collins clenched her jaw, looking at the view screen as the towering dreadnought loomed ever closer, its weapons charging again. The Tyraxians weren't playing by any known rules of engagement. They didn't care for diplomacy or first contact. They had come to crush, to dominate. Her mind snapped back to the present. The Vanguard's mission was clear: survive. Protect humanity's honor at all costs. She knew this wasn't just about the Vanguard. This was about the survival of humanity itself. "We can't run, and we can't fight them conventionally," Captain Collins muttered under her breath. She knew that every second mattered. Their shields were failing. They had no time left. If they didn't do something drastic, Earth's first military mission into space would be its last. Without hesitation, Collins made the call that would change everything. "All hands, brace for impact. Prepare to engage in full-speed assault," she ordered, her voice cold but resolute. The crew froze for a moment, disbelief flashing across their faces. "Captain?" one of the officers questioned, his eyes wide with confusion. "I'm not asking," Collins snapped. "We're charging right into them. Full speed ahead." A deadly silence fell across the bridge as the crew exchanged uncertain glances. The Vanguard was a nimble ship, but charging into a dreadnought was madness. Yet, the captain's resolve was unwavering. In that moment, every officer on the bridge knew they had no other choice. They were going to make the ultimate sacrifice, or they were going to find a way to defeat the Tyraxians, no matter the odds. The engines roared to life as the Vanguard surged forward, faster than it had ever moved before. The Tyraxian Dreadnought loomed closer, its massive weapons charging for another strike. But the humans didn't flinch. Instead, they powered through the storm of fire. The ship jolted as it took more hits, but it kept going, pushing itself toward the heart of the Tyraxian warship. Collins gripped the edge of her command chair, eyes locked on the view screen. The Dreadnought's colossal form grew larger and larger, blocking out the stars in front of them. "We're almost there, Captain," the tactical officer shouted. "Shields at 30% and dropping fast." "Keep going," Collins barked. She had no illusions of surviving this. But if they could get close enough, if they could somehow breach the Dreadnought's defenses. A deafening boom shook the ship as the Vanguard plowed forward. The entire bridge lurched violently as the ship's systems fought to maintain stability. The crew gritted their teeth, holding on for dear life. Captain Collins didn't blink. She was locked on her target. The heart of the Tyraxian Dreadnought was right there, just within their reach. And then it happened. The ship's engines flared, burning bright as they pushed through the last barrier of fire from the Tyraxians' weapons. The Vanguard's hull scraped against the massive Dreadnought as it made its way into the abyss, the two ships on a collision course. The crew braced themselves. The moment of impact was coming. But as the Vanguard made contact, something unexpected occurred. There was no deafening explosion, no destruction. Instead, the ship's hull slid into something unexpected, a shimmering, translucent field that absorbed the Vanguard's momentum, stopping them mere feet from the Tyraxian core. A strange energy surged around them, as if the ship had entered another realm entirely. The crew stared at the viewscreen in stunned silence, as they realized they were still alive. Their shields had held against all odds. Captain Collins' heart pounded in her chest. They weren't dead. Not yet. And somehow, against all expectation, the Vanguard was still in one piece. "Captain." The officer whispered in disbelief. We're still here." Captain Collins slowly stood up, her breath steadying. A smirk tugged at the corner of her lips. The Tyraxians had made a grave mistake. The fight had only just begun. The U.S.S. Vanguard surged forward, its engines roaring at full power, straight into the heart of the Tyraxian Dreadnought. The crew could feel the ship's hull groaning under the immense pressure, a deep, rumbling sound vibrating through the entire vessel, as if the ship itself were holding its breath. The view from the bridge showed nothing but the massive, menacing hull of the alien ship filling the viewscreen, its black surface littered with strange patterns that seemed to pulse in a rhythm all their own. Captain Arya Collins watched with a mixture of steely determination and grim resolve, knowing that this reckless move was their only chance to survive. There was no turning back now. The bridge crew braced themselves, but they knew that all their advanced technology, all their training, would mean nothing if their gamble failed. Then, with a deafening crash, the Vanguard made contact with the Tyraxian Dreadnought. The entire ship shook violently, sending crew members scrambling to hold their positions. But instead of the obliterating explosion that everyone had feared, something far stranger happened. Instead of being torn apart, the Vanguard passed through a shimmering, almost invisible energy barrier. The shockwave that followed the collision sent a jolt of energy through the ship, but rather than incinerating the Vanguard's hull, the energy field absorbed the full brunt of the Tyraxians' devastating firepower. The Vanguard shuddered but stayed intact. A crackling hum filled the bridge as the experimental quantum shield, still in its earliest stages, did its job, protecting the ship from destruction. Captain Collins blinked, trying to process the unbelievable reality unfolding before her. They weren't dead. They weren't even badly damaged. The shields had held. Against all odds, the Vanguard was alive, and the Tyraxian ship had not expected this. The chaos of the moment was dizzying. The Tyraxians, too, seemed stunned. Their weapons faltered, their systems misfired in confusion, and the massive Dreadnought was rocked by the energy discharges that followed the collision. It wasn't just a surface-level shake, it was a deep, powerful disruption that tore through the alien ship's inner workings. Some sections of the ship exploded, sending debris and fire into the cold vacuum of space. The entire Tyraxian vessel, so mighty and fearsome moments before, was thrown into disarray. "Captain!" shouted the tactical officer, his voice filled with disbelief. "The Tyraxian ship. It's in chaos. Their weapons are malfunctioning, and their engines are losing power." For a brief moment, there was silence on the bridge. The crew exchanged looks of stunned surprise. They had charged headfirst into certain death, expecting to be obliterated, but instead, the Vanguard had emerged relatively unharmed. Even the hull was surprisingly intact, a testament to the power of the quantum shield technology. This was no ordinary battle. It was a moment of victory, however small, against one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. "Don't celebrate yet," Captain Collins said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a blade. "We're not out of the fire yet. Stay focused." Her eyes never left the view screen. The Tyraxian ship was still a massive threat. Their survival so far had been a fluke, a stroke of fortune, but they had no time to dwell on it. The Vanguard had taken a beating, and it was only a matter of time before the Tyraxians regained control. The captain's mind raced, calculating their next move. If they didn't act quickly, they would lose the advantage they had been given by sheer luck. "Lieutenant, signal all teams to prepare for boarding," Captain Collins ordered. "We're going in." The tactical officer's hands flew over the controls. "Boarding teams are ready, Captain. But the Tyraxian defenses are still operational. They'll know we're coming." Collins nodded. "It doesn't matter. We have one shot at this, and we're not backing down." With that, she turned to the ship's lead engineer, a no-nonsense officer named Lieutenant Samir Hawke. "Lieutenant, I want you and your team to board the Tyraxian ship. You'll sabotage their core and plant explosives. We need to cripple them from the inside out." Hawke gave a sharp salute, his face lit with determination. "Understood, Captain. We won't fail you." Captain Collins knew this was a risky move. The Tyraxian ship was massive, and the boarding party would be venturing into the heart of enemy territory. The chances of failure were high, but if they succeeded, it would cripple the Tyraxians beyond repair. The Vanguard could finish the job, and the Tyraxian threat would be neutralized. If they failed, well, it didn't bear thinking about. Within moments, a team of elite soldiers and engineers, led by Lieutenant Hawke, boarded the shuttle that would take them to the Tyraxian ship. They were heavily armed, equipped with advanced technology and explosives, but they were also stepping into the unknown. The Tyraxians would not go down easily. These were warriors whose entire existence revolved around dominance, and they would not surrender without a fight. The shuttle shot out of the Vanguard's hangar, racing toward the Tyraxian Dreadnought, its engines blasting a trail of light through the darkness of space. As it approached, the sheer size of the alien ship became even more overwhelming, its dark, jagged edges intimidating, even in its moment of disarray. The Vanguard's crew watched the shuttle's approach on the view screen, knowing that the fate of the battle and perhaps their lives rested on the success of this mission. The shuttle docked with one of the damaged sections of the Tyraxian vessel. The doors opened, and the boarding team, fully suited and armed, stormed out, moving quickly through the alien corridors, their weapons raised and their senses sharp. The interior of the Dreadnought was a strange, alien landscape, twisting, jagged hallways lit by flickering, eerie lights. The air was thick, almost oppressive, with a strange hum that seemed to come from the ship itself. Every corner they turned could bring a fresh wave of Tyraxian soldiers, ready to fight to the death. "We move fast. We move silent," Lieutenant Hawke ordered. "Find their core and plant the explosives. Don't let anyone get in our way." As the team made their way deeper into the ship, the Tyraxian defense systems began to react, sending squads of soldiers to intercept them. The first skirmish was brutal and fast. The humans, despite being outnumbered, fought fiercely, using their advanced training and technology to their advantage. The Tyraxians, with their superior strength and ruthless tactics, were formidable opponents, but they weren't prepared for the relentless ingenuity and resourcefulness of the human crew. Despite the chaos, the team pressed on, heading toward the heart of the ship, their mission clear. Every step was a risk, every breath a potential last one. Yet the humans pushed forward, knowing that they were humanity's best and perhaps only hope to stop the Tyraxian threat once and for all. Time was running out. The Vanguard had given them a chance to strike, but it wouldn't last forever. The U.S.S. Vanguard had just made contact with the Tyraxian Dreadnought, and the chaos that followed was nothing short of a battle for survival. Despite the unexpected success of their earlier charge, the humans knew that their situation was far from secure. The Tyraxians, furious at the audacity of the Vanguard, quickly regained their composure and launched a swift counterattack. The alien ship's remaining weapons flared with power, sending waves of concentrated fire toward the human ship. The Vanguard's shields flickered under the strain, but they held firm, their technology proving once again to be more resilient than the Tyraxians had anticipated. But the Tyraxians were not just relying on their weaponry. They had soldiers, ruthless and highly trained, ready to defend their ship at all costs. Within moments, Tyraxian forces began flooding the corridors of their own ship, meeting the human boarding team head-on. These soldiers, tall and imposing, were armed with weapons that seemed like an extension of their very bodies, each one trained in the deadly art of combat. Their armor, a dark, sleek material, was nearly impervious to most human weaponry. But even so, they were overconfident. They had never before faced an enemy like the humans' quick-thinking, adaptive, and relentless. Captain Collins, having personally led a team to board the alien Dreadnought, now found herself engaged in brutal, hand-to-hand combat against the Tyraxian soldiers. Her heart pounded in her chest as she narrowly dodged a strike from a Tyraxian soldier's blade, the weapon missing her by mere inches. She countered swiftly, using a combat move she had learned in her years of military service. Her fist collided with the soldier's armor with a loud crack, sending him reeling. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Tyraxians were strong, fast, and deadly, but they underestimated the resolve and ingenuity of the human spirit. The human soldiers were outnumbered, yet they fought with a ferocity that made the Tyraxians hesitate. Collins and her crew were forced into close-quarters battles in narrow hallways, where there was little room to maneuver. But where the Tyraxians relied on their brute strength, the humans relied on their agility, their quick thinking, and their ability to adapt to any situation. With each fight, the humans used their surroundings to their advantage, using alien technology as makeshift weapons and improvised tools. The humans didn't need the same level of technology as their enemies, they only needed the will to fight. Meanwhile, the engineers, led by Lieutenant Samir Hockey, were working at breakneck speed to keep the Vanguard operational despite the continuous barrage of fire from the Tyraxian Dreadnought. The Vanguard systems were beginning to show signs of strain, but the human engineers refused to give up. They were pushing the ship's technology to its limits, desperately working to reroute power to the shields and weapons. Hawk's hands moved with practiced precision as he worked to stabilize the ship's systems. Every moment counted. The Vanguard was a symbol of human achievement, and it could not fail now. As the battle raged on, the human soldiers began to sabotage key systems aboard the Tyraxian ship. Using their knowledge of the alien technology they had encountered during their mission, they carefully disabled power conduits, severed communication lines, and set explosive charges in critical sections of the ship. The Tyraxian Dreadnought, once a nearly unstoppable force, was now starting to feel the weight of the human strike. The crew aboard the alien ship began to panic as systems began failing, their once precise control slipping away. The humans, despite being vastly outnumbered, had managed to turn the tide of the battle through sheer determination and resourcefulness. But then, in the midst of the chaos, an unexpected discovery was made. Lieutenant Hawke, working feverishly in the heart of the Tyraxian ship's power core, noticed something strange. The Tyraxian weapon systems, despite their immense power, were not as invulnerable as they had appeared. There was a flaw in their design, a critical weakness in the way their weapons were calibrated. The Tyraxian weapons required an exact, precise alignment of their energy conduits to fire effectively, and this calibration was controlled by a complex system that, unbeknownst to the Tyraxians, had a limited margin of error. The humans, unpredictable as always, had unwittingly triggered this flaw during their earlier attacks. The realization hit like a lightning bolt. If the humans could manipulate the calibration system, they could disable the Tyraxian weapons permanently, rendering them harmless. It was a gamble one that could either cripple the Tyraxians for good or leave the Vanguard and its crew exposed to even greater danger. But Captain Collins knew that they had no other choice. If they didn't take this chance, the Tyraxians would retaliate with everything they had. "Lieutenant Hawk," Collins called over the comms, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "can you shut down their weapon systems?" Hawk's voice crackled through the communicator. "I think I can, but I need time, Captain. I'm in the heart of their power grid, and there's a lot of work to do." "Do it," Collins ordered, her eyes scanning the corridor as she fought off another Tyraxian soldier. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." With a fierce determination, the engineers and soldiers doubled down, pushing themselves harder than ever before. The Tyraxians, realizing that something was wrong, began to fight with even more desperation, but the humans were ready. The battle had shifted. The humans were no longer simply defending themselves. They were taking the fight to the heart of the Tyraxian ship. Outside, the Vanguard held its ground, battered but resilient. The Tyraxian Dreadnought, weakened from within, continued to fire sporadically, but its aim was off, its systems malfunctioning. Every attack that landed on the Vanguard now seemed weaker than the last, and the humans began to sense that the tide of the battle was slowly turning in their favor. The Tyraxian soldiers, once so sure of their superiority, now found themselves facing an enemy they could not predict, an enemy that refused to break. On the inside of the Tyraxian ship, Hawk's team worked feverishly, finally managing to initiate the shutdown of the weapon systems. The lights flickered as the ship's weapons began to power down, leaving the Tyraxians helpless in their own ship. The humans, against all odds, had found the flaw in their enemy's seemingly invincible technology, and now the balance of power had shifted. With the Tyraxian weapons disabled, the humans could now strike decisively, knowing that they had one last shot at ending this battle. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since the Vanguard had engaged the Tyraxian Dreadnought, Captain Collins allowed herself a moment of hope. They were not only surviving, they were winning. The battle had reached its boiling point, with both the Vanguard and the Tyraxian Dreadnought locked in a deadly dance of destruction. The countdown clock was ticking, a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. The damage to the Vanguard was significant. Hull breaches, flickering lights, and failing systems were all visible, but the ship was still operational, barely. Captain Collins gritted her teeth as she watched the status reports flood in. The Tyraxian Dreadnought, despite the devastation inside its own walls, was not going down easily. Its weapons, though temporarily disabled, were still a major threat. The alien ship's internal systems were starting to unravel, but the Tyraxian commander, a being known for his strategic genius, refused to admit defeat. Instead, he had one final move left, a move that could wipe out humanity's home planet. The Tyraxian captain, with cold, calculating precision, set a course for Earth. The orders were clear, a direct assault on the home planet. Earth had been nothing more than a distant curiosity to the Tyraxians, at first an insignificant world. But now, after their defeat in space, the Tyraxians saw it as the last chance to preserve their dominance in the galaxy. If they couldn't conquer Earth in battle, they would erase it altogether. Captain Collins watched in horror as the Tyraxian ship's trajectory shifted. Earth was in its sights, and it was on a collision course for total annihilation. The thought of her home, the cradle of humanity, being reduced to nothing but dust, filled her with an intensity she had never known. "We can't let them get close," she muttered, her mind racing. The Vanguard's remaining weaponry could barely scratch the Tyraxian Dreadnought now. Their shields were almost gone, their engines sputtering, and the crew's energy was running low. If they couldn't stop the Tyraxian ship soon, Earth would be lost. "Captain, their course is set," the tactical officer reported, his voice strained. "If they don't change direction, they'll be in Earth's atmosphere in 10 minutes. Captain Collins' mind was a storm of possibilities. Time was running out. She looked at the ship's status display, and then to the chief engineer, Lieutenant Samir Hawkey, whose face was a mask of exhaustion but also determination. "Lieutenant, do we have anything left to fight with?" Collins asked, her voice steady despite the desperation creeping in. Hawkey glanced over his shoulder at the dimly lit engineering bay. "Captain, The engines are failing. Shields are almost down. But there's one last option. He paused, studying the schematics of the ship's core. We can reconfigure the engines to fire a gravitational pulse. It's a one-time use, and it's risky. If it works, it might destabilize their shields and fry their systems. But if we misfire or the Vanguard can't handle the strain... "We won't misfire," Collins interrupted, her voice sharp with resolve. "Do it. Now." "We don't have time to hesitate." Hockey gave a tight nod and turned back to the control panel, his hands moving quickly over the buttons, reprogramming the Vanguard's engines for the most dangerous maneuver they'd ever attempted. The entire ship seemed to groan under the strain, and the warning alarms screamed in protest. But Hawk's focus never wavered. The gravitational pulse would require every last bit of the ship's remaining power, and it could only be fired once. It was all or nothing. On the bridge, Collins felt her stomach tighten. She had led them this far, and now she was about to gamble everything on a shot that had no guarantee of success. The Tyraxian Dreadnought was mere moments away from completing its course to Earth. Every second counted. She glanced at her crew. They were all watching her, waiting for her orders. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but she was not about to back down. Earth was depending on them. Her crew was depending on her. "Get ready," she said, her voice low but firm. "This is our moment of truth. Fire when ready." Hawk's voice came over the comm, strained but clear. "Captain, the pulse is ready. We're primed for launch." The Vanguard's engines hummed to life, the powerful surge of energy building up in the heart of the ship. The gravitational pulse was unlike anything they had ever used. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a massive release of energy, a shockwave of gravitational force that could bend space itself. The Vanguard's crew braced for the impact, knowing that if this failed, they would be stranded in the void of space, their ship too damaged to survive much longer. But they couldn't afford to think about that. Not now. With a sharp command, Collins gave the signal. "Fire." The Vanguard rocked violently under the strain, the hull creaking in protest as the ship's systems fought to stay functional. The pulse shot across the vast distance between the two ships, slamming into the Tyraxian Dreadnought with the force of a cosmic hammer. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The Tyraxian ship, massive and fearsome, seemed to shudder, its remaining energy shields flickering erratically. The pulse had hit its mark. The shields, already weakened from the earlier battles, began to destabilize, their energy output going haywire. The Tyraxian Dreadnought groaned as if in pain, its systems failing one by one. The Tyraxian captain, who had once been so confident of victory, watched helplessly as his ship spiraled toward a catastrophic collapse. Then, with a deafening roar that vibrated through the very fabric of space, the Tyraxian Dreadnought exploded. The shockwave from the blast rippled through the void, sending debris and fragments of the once mighty ship scattering in all directions. The Vanguard was thrown off course by the force of the explosion, but its shields held just long enough to protect it from the worst of the blast. Captain Collins stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the remnants of the Tyraxian Dreadnought now fading into the distance. A tense silence filled the bridge as the crew absorbed the reality of what had just happened. The enemy ship was gone. Earth was safe. For now. But the battle had taken its toll. The Vanguard was heavily damaged, its systems on the brink of collapse, and the crew, though victorious, knew that their journey was far from over. Captain Collins breathed a sigh of relief, but the weight of the moment was far from gone. "We did it," she whispered, almost to herself. "We've won for now." But even in that victory, there was a knowing glance between her and her crew. The war wasn't over yet. The Tyraxians would not forget this humiliation, and the universe was a far larger place than they had ever imagined. The fight for humanity's future had only just begun. In the aftermath of the battle, the USS Vanguard drifted slowly in the vast emptiness of space, battered but intact. The ship's hull, once sleek and pristine, now bore the scars of the intense conflict, the deep burns and dents from the Tyraxian Dreadnought's weapons still fresh in the metal. But it was still here, still operational, still alive. The ship had survived the impossible, and so had its crew. They had faced the most powerful force humanity had ever encountered and emerged victorious. The Tyraxian Dreadnought, a symbol of terror and invincibility, was now a mere wreckage, drifting helplessly through the void. The once dominant alien warship was a shattered relic, its power and arrogance reduced to nothing. Captain Aria Collins stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the wreckage of the Tyraxian ship. There was a sense of disbelief in her eyes. She had witnessed the unthinkable. Her crew had faced overwhelming odds and defied them all. Humanity had not only survived in the universe, but it had proven its ability to fight back and win, even against those who thought they were invincible. The Vanguard had held strong, its innovative quantum shields keeping it intact when the most powerful weapons in the galaxy failed to destroy it. The human soldiers had fought with unmatched courage, using ingenuity to sabotage the alien ship from within. Their resilience had been their greatest weapon, and it had been enough. "Message sent, Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Hawk, his hands still trembling from the tension that had filled the ship moments earlier. "Earth Command has received our signal. They're calling it a victory." Collins nodded, but her thoughts weren't solely on Earth. The victory, while monumental, had only just begun to ripple out across the galaxy. Humanity's triumph would echo far beyond their homeworld. The universe, once a vast unknown, had just learned that humans were not weak. They were not naive. They had faced the might of the Tyraxians, and they had stood their ground. The Vanguard's crew had shown that humans could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most fearsome species, and that they would not back down from a fight. That was a message that would spread, a message the Tyraxians would never forget. As Collins stood before the view screen, the image of Earth filling the space before her, she could feel the weight of her responsibilities. The victory over the Tyraxians was a powerful symbol, but it was only the beginning. The Tyraxian fleet would now be forced to reconsider their approach to humanity. They had underestimated Earth once, but they would never make that mistake again. The humiliation they had suffered in battle would not be taken lightly, and they would be far more cautious in the future. But Captain Collins knew that this was just one victory in a much larger, far-reaching conflict. Humanity's place in the galaxy was now firmly established, but the true test was yet to come. Other species, equally powerful and dangerous, would no doubt take notice of humanity's strength. The galaxy was a vast and unpredictable place, and humanity had only just begun to explore its depths. "Captain, the Tyraxian fleet has been making adjustments," Commander Liu reported from the tactical station. "They're regrouping. It seems they've reassessed their strategy, but they're not giving up. They'll be back, but they'll approach us differently now. They're far more cautious." Collins felt a tightness in her chest at the news. She had expected as much. The Tyraxians would never forget this defeat, and they would learn from it. But that only made humanity's victory even sweeter. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when pushed to the brink. Earth had earned its place in the stars, and humanity had earned the respect of those who once viewed them as insignificant. The Vanguard had become a symbol, not just of military strength, but of human ingenuity and courage. The universe would now have to reckon with humanity, and that was something no one could ignore. "Prepare a report for Earth Command," Collins said, her voice calm but resolute. "Let them know what we've accomplished. We'll make contact with the other species that have been observing us, but we'll do it on our terms. This is our galaxy now." With those words, Captain Collins looked out at the stars once more. The universe was vast, and there were still many unknowns ahead. The Tyraxians were only one of many threats that might emerge from the darkness of space. But in this moment, Collins knew something fundamental had shifted. Humanity had proven that they could hold their ground, that they had the will to fight when faced with the unknown. As the crew celebrated their victory, Collins allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. They had done the impossible, and Earth was safe for now. But she understood that this was just the beginning. Humanity had not only survived the test of the Tyraxian Dreadnought, they had proven they could thrive in a universe full of dangers. The stars were no longer a place of uncertainty for them. They were a place of opportunity. Captain Collins stood tall, knowing that whatever the galaxy threw at humanity next, they would face it together. And this time, humanity wouldn't back down. The stars were theirs to explore, and they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey had only just begun, but humanity's place in the galaxy was now assured. They had earned it, and they would defend it no matter what.